None of us makes it through life alive. Life is a 100% fatal condition. And this has become a lot more important to me probably since 2020, once the government started restricting civil liberties for the whole coronavirus lockdown. It became obvious to me that our nation, in fact, many nations of the world, we reached a critical tipping point. Now, people can argue about when do you actually know when a civilization is doomed. And some argue it was further in the past, depending on your political perspective. Some people think it was the passing of the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. Some think it was the income tax amendment. Some think it was the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. Some people trace it back to the American Civil War. I think it was Tocqueville, or de Tocqueville, I forget how you pronounce his name, who observed that while Americans were well-read and ambitious and all these positive things, there's this hucksterism and just living for the dollar mentality that seemed to be growing amongst the population of otherwise moral and righteous people that concerned him. I can't give you chapter and verse, even the book or letter he wrote. It's something that just sticks in my mind. And if I'm misquoting or misremembering, misparaphrasing, then go ahead, hit me in the comments with it. So I don't know when the actual tipping point was, but it was clear to me with the mass suspension of civil liberties and the degree at which the population at large embraced it. Not like resentfully dealt with it, but actually embraced it. The fact that people would persecute each other, not necessarily politically, but socially, for, not wanting to get on board with the social distancing, that not visiting your friends and relatives. You realize in an emergency, you want to circle the wagons in with your friends and relatives. That's the idea. You might exclude others, but you keep your inner circle closer. You'd still maintain social connections. And I noticed how much people would exclude their own friends. I knew quite well who was the in-group, who was the out-group, even in my friend group, where, I wasn't allowed to visit, but some of them were still visiting each other. So, I knew my social standing. Some people were actually the inner circle, and other people, if you think about the metaphors used in motorcycle clubs, and I don't know if this is true to the norm, or if it's just as presented on a show like Sons of Anarchy, but you had the hang-arounds. People just kind of see what it's like to be around you, and then you have the probationary members who trying to prove their worth, and then of course you have the full members. And when life got rough, I found out I was just a hang around. But whatever. To the degree that people embrace this authoritarianism wholeheartedly, they want to get track and trace apps on the phone, want everyone to have these Bluetooth track and trace so you know who was near whom, and we can track who's near whom, and whatever. It's ridiculous. Stay home, save lives, don't go to work. How are people supposed to survive and pay their bills and so on? But I'm not trying to relitigate that. I'm just noticing, people embrace the authoritarianism and the willful shutdown of human activity, which means, in a way, human life. To the degree they just embrace the fact that, guess what? The factory workers who work in the food processing plants aren't going to be showing up, or fewer are going to show up, and the food's going to come out slower, and they're just cheering it on, we're gonna leave crops to rot because there's enough PPE for the farmers or something. During any other plague in the past, one of the most important things to do is to make sure the food comes in, so you're not adding starvation on top of disease. And to me, that was just the evidence that we're done for. There's no fixing this. To the degree that people would just jumped on board taking a very rapidly produced experimental treatment and would even willingly take that treatment to keep their jobs, told me that we were done for. So I don't know when the tipping point was, but the actual evidence of that we were done for, to me, that was it. And so I knew my time was running out, and I didn't know when it was going to run out. I thought the authoritarian impulse was just going to increase, right? And I'm like, okay, well, it's going to come to a point where I'm going to have to choose between, assimilating or losing my life. And I said, okay, if I have to lose my life, then so be it. Die with dignity rather than live as a, Borg drone, a slave to the collective. But they backed off for a while, and now, of course, we potentially have fuel shortages, and it make it worse. And there may be food shortages if not enough fertilizer gets out through the Strait of Hormuz. And that's bad. And a general running down of, modern industrial civilization, a controlled collapse. And eventually, authoritarian measures may be implemented to manage that collapse. And the question is, are you going to submit to it, or are you going to disobey? Are you going to not go with the flow? And not going with the flow may well mean putting your life at risk. It may mean dying. It may mean, the soldiers of the regime come for you. It may mean that your neighbors even come for you, or whatever. And I'm feeling just time's almost over. Time's up for a lot of us who won't submit. Now, I might get lip service to this and to that, but ultimately, just for anyone who's a nonconformist is going to be squashed by this thing, probably. I mean, some will get through, but some won't. And I'm not planning on getting through. Like, who am I to say, oh, I'm so wise, I'm going to get through the other side. I'm going to live to a ripe old age, having, faced the authoritarian impulses of a decrepit political and economic system, and it very well may devour me. And there's a lot of things I want to do in life that I may not get to do if I take a stand, if I have the courage to not submit. I have to give those things up. And understandably, a lot of people would be, want to linger in this existence, in this flesh, to experience those things if possible. But am I, and are we in general willing to lose our lives for the sake of, moral righteousness, for lack of a better term? To not be cogs in a totalitarian system. And I like to think that I'd have the courage to just, to lose it, because, consciousness doesn't end when the body dies. It's just not from the perspective of the body. And lacking the needs of the body, to eat, to drink water, to deal with discomforts, to sleep, to fulfill the sexual appetite, and whatever, all these things that come with being human. Your consciousness, free of that, is going to have different priorities, right? The things that you wanted to do in life once you're dead, whatever it is that your consciousness does, it's probably going to change. And we got to be honest with ourselves. A lot of what we desire, whether it be our hobbies, our interests, our preferences, is based on the fact that life is limited, that we have, 70 years, plus or minus a few years on this earth, and time is limited, and we try to maximize our satisfaction, our fulfillment, our pleasure, based on our individual temperaments, because time is short. Because we spend most of our time working, and then we spend part of our time sleeping, there's very little time to actually do something personal, that you enjoy. So we value these things very much, but once your body dies, and your consciousness is no longer connected to the body, these imperatives will likely disappear. Not that whatever makes you peculiar as a soul, as a spirit, it wouldn't still be there, but the drives, the base drives of being a flesh and blood creature won't be there. And so it really is it really anything to fear being dead? Because we're all going to die anyways. Sooner or later, you're going to die, and you're going to leave some things undone. There are some things you're not going to do. You could live to a ripe old age. You could live to be like 95 years old and say to your friend, say, hey, I'll see you for breakfast tomorrow. And then you go home and fall down the stairs. And then you hit your head and it's over. And your friend shows up at breakfast and you're not there, and they're confused, and they go and they find you, they find your body there, and oh crap, old John Smith just died. We were going to have breakfast. And are you really going to regret after passing not having breakfast with your friend? Or is your perception going to be different? Like, well, I'm dead, and I have compassion for my friend who misses me, but I don't need to eat breakfast with him anymore because I don't need to eat. And while you might be aware of the sun and even the sunrise from a particular perspective, were you really going to cherish it the way you do as a living, breathing entity? Get up in the morning, see the sun, take in the fresh air, hear the birds. That feeling of renewal, and then having breakfast, breaking the fast with a friend. You might be aware that creatures do these things, but you won't have the need anymore. And so, once you're dead, have you really lost anything? Are you really missing out? And from that point of view, I don't think you are. I don't think I will. So, if there are tough choices to make in this life that might result in your own demise, because you have to take a stand, you have to be courageous, you have to risk death for the sake of righteousness, for the quality of your soul, of your what it really means to be you, then it's okay. So I hope I put that into perspective for people who are, struggle with, like, here's this, authoritarian or totalitarian even expectation put on by the state, or the actors connected with the state, and you say, man, this is frightening. And is the flesh wants to keep on breathing, and wants to keep on eating, and wants to keep on experiencing things. That's part of being a flesh and blood creature. But knowing that all these ambitions and plans and designs you have for your life, if you have to sacrifice them, it's okay. Because once you're dead, none of that stuff's going to matter anyways. At least I don't think it will. I'm sure this is a very depressing subject, but I hope someone found some benefit from it. Because that's where I'm at presently on this subject. Maybe I might change my mind in the future, but this seems to be the rational assessment of life. Thanks for watching.